trying to hide his failures as a writer from the world, Paul Kemp, unable to publish any books, moves from New York to Puerto Rico. Here he plans to write for a local newspaper called the San Juan Star. The first thing Paul does when he comes to town is to get drunk, as he is addicted to alcohol. In the morning of the next day, he heads to the job interview with a severe hangover. However, Warden Lauterman doesn't care about his shabby appearance. In this city, there are few good journalists, so the choice is very small. The main thing is that the addiction to alcoholic beverages does not bother him to do his job. In the offices, Paul meets the photographer, whose name is Bob Sala. Later, a man named Sanderson leaves him his business card. Bob shows him how the work is done in the editorial office, and in the evening he takes him to a club for a drink. Along with them are the other staff members of the newspaper. Bob is convinced that the newspaper will be closed shortly, and he hopes to take the TFR to flee to Mexico and start everything from scratch. Paul, on the other hand, hopes his journalism career won't end so soon. Here Bob also introduces him to Moberg, who looks more like a homeless alcoholic than a reporter. Lauterman wants to fire him, but he can't. Bob later tells him about Sanderson, who he has good connections, and occasionally he gives reporters tips on what to write. After dinner, Bob takes Paul back to his hotel paid for by his boss. During the journey, he proposes to move to his accommodation in case he wants to leave the hotel. They will have to live together, but at least they will have a TV and a refrigerator. Bob obviously does not specify that this TV is in the neighbor's house, that she is deaf and she turns it on loudly, so they can watch it with binoculars. At the hotel, Paul wants to swim in the pool but is denied access. Currently, there is a private party there for which an invitation is needed, so Paul sits on a pedal boat and goes out to sea alone. Here he meets a woman who has decided to swim naked in the middle of the night. Her name is Jeannot, and the man falls in love with her from the first glance at her. Paul's job as a journalist is to write articles about local bowling tournaments and horoscopes. Lauterman explains to him what needs to be changed in his article, and then he reminds Paul that the newspaper pays only for hotel accommodation, while the contents of the minibar are at his expense. This horrific news prompts Paul to consider moving in with Bob. Lauterman sends Paul to meet the mayor of Miami at the airport, where the reporter is to take a photo and interview him. He advises him not to write any criticism. Sanderson sits next to him at the airport. When the mayor's flight is canceled, Sanderson invites Paul for a drink at his house. Sanderson is a real estate agent who lives in a luxurious beach house and drives various sports cars. Sanders' lifestyle is what Paul aspires to. Shortly thereafter, Paul discovers that Sanderson is married to her adored Jeannot, who pretends not to know him in her husband's eyes. Anderson offers him to write advertising articles for him and his business associates, and Paul obviously accepts because he needs the money. Leaving Anderson's luxurious home, Paul heads to Paul's small apartment, located in a fetid and rundown neighborhood of Puerto Rico. In one of the rooms, he finds the Fighting Cocks. Bob confesses that Moberg also lives here sometimes. Leaving his things behind, Bob accompanies Paul to cockfights, where Bob's cock wins. When they return home, they discover that Moberg has brought with him a filter from the Bacardi factory. These filters are in the last phase of cleaning, and a lot of pure alcohol remains inside them. Together with Bob, they squeeze them and get free alcohol. Sometime later, Paul prepared some serious material for the newspaper on the problems of Puerto Rico. Paul has experienced the poverty and abandonment in which the citizens of the neighborhood live, and he wants to make this reality public by trying to put pressure on Lauterman, who however refuses and forbids him to write an article about it, since it could be detrimental to the local tourism market. Lauterman says tourists don't have to worry about local problems. They just need to know who is the best at bowling. Returning to Sanders' home, Paul finds a husband and wife making love at sea. Paul starts spying on the couple through the telescope, and he doesn't notice when the other guests arrive. In the evening, Sanderson invites Paul to meet some contractors responsible for a construction project. They intend to establish a hotel on a nearby island. The problem is the local residents, who will not be happy when the number of tourists increases dramatically. So they want to run a real estate scam, and Paul has to write a fake article about it. Paul says he will consider the offer and give his answer Monday at the office. At night with Bob, they look for a place to grab a bite. On the way, they continue to gulp down the free alcohol they got from the filters. Arriving at the diner, Bob asks to be served, but the waitress insists that the kitchen is closed. The bold behavior of the Americans attracts the attention of the locals, and Paul quickly realizes that they will soon be beaten up, which is why they drive Bob's car and run away, chased by a crowd of angry villagers. The two try to defend themselves in every way, even burning alcohol to use it as a weapon. The police intervene and divide the two factions, taking the two Americans to jail. The judge is about to convict the couple for their destruction, but Sanderson steps in to pay their bail, confident that Kemp will return the favor in another way. Without even sleeping, the duo goes to find the car, whose conditions are pitiful. They have no choice but to make do and go back to town anyway, where they meet the cop from the previous night again. They manage to escape but end up in an accident. Paul arrives late at the office, and Sanderson offers him to sign confidentiality papers and asks him to pick up his wife, who is still at home. Kemp then borrows Sanderson's car and he fetches it as requested. At first the two seem to want to kiss, but Paul resists the temptation. During the return trip, the two seem to be enjoying themselves anyway, and Kemp reveals her husband's criminal plans. The next day there will be a carnival which will also be attended by Sanderson and his wife. Before the carnival, Paul must visit the island where the hotel is to be built. Here the details of the project are explained to him. Paul takes Bob with him, promising him that they will go to the carnival together afterwards. Seeing Bob with him, Sanderson is furious as he is convinced that this alcoholic photographer will not be able to keep their secret. After that, everyone goes to the party, where they continue to drink. When night falls, the group heads to a nightclub, where drunk Chanot begins to dance sensually with some of the island's natives to provoke Sanderson, who tries to intervene but is thrown out by the club's guards. Kemp tries to intervene, fearing that Chanot may be harmed, but the natives prevent him from entering and order him to return home. Kemp gets even more angry, but Bob holds him back and convinces him that it is better to leave. Paul successfully searches for Chanot all night. The next morning, Sanderson tells Kemp that their partnership is over. Back home exhausted, Sala and Kemp are informed by Moberg that Lauterman has resigned and that the San Juan Star is closing down. He also sells him some hallucinogenic drugs, which the two decide to experiment together. After a few panic attacks due to hallucinations, Kemp has a revelation during the trip and decides to go to the typewriter to report Sanderson's shady business. Lauterman returns to run the paper but does not want to publish Kemp's new article. After days of absence, Chanot comes back to Kemp's house, repudiated by her husband. Out of spite, Sanderson revokes the bail, which means that Paul and Sala are now being wanted by the police. After this dramatic farewell, Kemp welcomes Chanot into Sala's home, while Moberg reveals that Lauterman has closed the paper. Kemp gets back to work, planning to publish a final issue of the San Juan Star, in which he wants to reveal the truth about Lauterman and Sanderson, while also adding all the articles about the social degradation of Puerto Rico that Lauterman had turned him down. However, the three roommates are broke, and to raise the money necessary for the publication of the latest issue, they start betting on cockfighters. To make sure their rooster wins every battle, Moberg and Kemp visit a native named Parpanebo. Parpanebo throws a blessing on the cockerel of Sala, making him, at least apparently, unbeatable. The three win all the cockfights involving their cockerel, but when they return to the newspaper office, they discover that the calcographic machinery and presses have already been confiscated. Kemp does not give up and continues with his investigation, stealing the boat from Sanderson. The credits explain that Kemp has returned to New York. He married Chanot and became a successful journalist, having finally found his voice as a writer. Subscribe for more videos like this. He turns on notifications and likes to help the channel grow. Thanks for watching.